My name is Keren Skubach. I've been working in InterSystems for 22 years. And this is a tough act to follow because I'm presenting after Tani. And I'm the last presentation of the day before the social event. So it's, I'll try to keep you interested till the end of the presentation. This presentation is about building a FHIR facade. Okay, we're going to talk about what a FHIR facade is, why would you like to use it, what you could do with it, okay, and how to actually build it. Okay. So first of all, if we look at the agenda, the first question would be, what's a FHIR facade? Okay, that's the main topic of the issue. And then we'll look at all the things you need to do in order to create your own FHIR facade. If you like to use it, the code is already uploaded to GitHub. Okay, you don't need to take a screen capture of the slides. You already have the slides in Cvent as well, so you can download the presentation. So it's up to you to decide how you want to show it or how you want to try it. Everything is up there by now. So let's speak about the FHIR server. Okay. What is a FHIR server? Well, basically, FHIR server is an application that allows you to send FHIR requests and get back FHIR responses, right? Basically, it also is able to keep those FHIR requests and responses as part of your own database, FHIR database. Keep everything in the resource repository. But not always, okay? It can also be a FHIR facade. FHIR facade means you do not need to keep the information as FHIR resources in your own resource repository. Once you install a FHIR server, okay, you're automatically keeping the information inside our own resource repository. But you can change it, okay, and take the information and keep it somewhere else. And you pretend to have a FHIR server, hence it is called a FHIR facade. Everyone who's going to contact your endpoint, your FHIR endpoint, would think there's a FHIR server behind the scenes, but basically there won't be any. Okay, so you won't keep that FHIR information as FHIR resources. You're going to do or create other resources from other places. The third option is to use our own FHIR adapter. The FHIR adapter is not basically a FHIR facade. It's basically a single interface that supports FHIR, but it doesn't give you a full FHIR facade. It gives you an endpoint, or in our case, a web application that you can send information into production and go from there. We're going to speak about the second one, okay, the FHIR facade option. If you want to create a FHIR server or a FHIR facade, you would have to use either Iris for Health, okay, or you would have to have Health Connect that would have a FHIR add-on. So the license needs to be upgraded to have a FHIR add-on in order to use a FHIR server or a FHIR facade infrastructure. Okay, so bear in mind, and you need to have a pretty updated version, 2021 forward, and then you can have your own creation of FHIR facade. So what are the benefits of using a FHIR facade? Well, basically, as I said before, you would be able to create, okay, you can be able to send requests and get response in FHIR. So everybody who wants to jump on the FHIR wagon and say, hey, I support FHIR, even though I don't have a FHIR repository, or I haven't decided if I want to create another FHIR database in my organization, would still be able to say that you support FHIR. Okay? You don't need to change your existing infrastructure. If you have other applications within your organization that have the data in it, even if it's not in the FHIR format, still be able to create your own FHIR facade. Okay? So you would be able to get FHIR information back and forth. You would be able to decide which kind of FHIR resources you want to support. Okay, you would not need to create all the resources. For example, at the beginning, I might be able to support only the observation and the patient resources, and I won't support any other FHIR resources. This is up to you. And the major benefit is the fact that if at one point along the way you would decide you want to keep that information in a FHIR repository, you would have the option to do that because you already have the infrastructure. All you need to do is point the information to a different place. Okay? Either keep it in a FHIR repository or take that information from other systems within your organization. Either way, if you decide to work with a FHIR server, meaning keeping the information in a FHIR repository, or create a FHIR facade, the first thing you would need to do is enhance our own classes, okay? The infrastructure classes that create the FHIR server. Bear in mind that you would need, or we would recommend to do it even if you're not going to create a FHIR facade, but in one point in the future, you would like to maintain your own code or customize your own logic in our own FHIR server. For example, if you would need to, let's say your organization decides that it doesn't want to return back information about patients that are diseased, okay, or VIP information, or anything else you decide you don't want to give back. So you need to customize some of the responses that are being returned back. We have methods that you can put your code in it to restrict these kind of things, but those methods are part of our own engine classes. You probably wouldn't want to change our own system classes, which is why you would need to inherit from them and give your own logic within it, okay? So this thing needs to be decided even before you create your own endpoint, because that class is part of the endpoint definition, and you cannot change it afterwards. If you would like to add your own code later on, you would need to create a new endpoint, okay? So even if you decide at one point in the future you might want it, our suggestion is to inherit from those three classes, even without putting any code in it, okay? Just to have a placeholder so you would be able to use it later on, okay? So in the definition of the endpoint, you'll see there's a point saying InteractionStrategy class. This is where you need to point to your own class instead of using our own system class. So let's speak about the FHIR architecture. Basically, what we have is on the left side, you would see we have all kinds of requests that are coming to our own FHIR endpoint. Okay? They're sending requests or sending data in a FHIR resource or HTTP methods in order to get data back in a FHIR resource. And we have our own data within your organization. It could be applications, it could be files, it could be any other place of data within our organization. And in the middle, we have our own FHIR server. Each FHIR server has a FHIR endpoint. Okay? We have the REST endpoint handler, get the information from that. I'm losing voice. Okay, so we get information through the endpoint handler, and that endpoint handler either points to an interoperability production, new one, just a second. Okay, so basically that endpoint would point either to an interoperability production or would point to our own resource repository, okay? And we're gonna focus on the top part of how to customize that endpoint. Okay? Basically, what we have in that endpoint are three classes. Everybody who's been to Tani's presentation before me or Theo's presentation yesterday knows about those three classes. Those three classes are the interaction class, InteractionStrategy class, and the repoManager class. All of them create a chain of classes points to another, and they create the infrastructure of creating our own FHIR server. Okay, so if we want to create our own customized FHIR server, we'll need to inherit from three of those classes. In the interaction class, I would have, and I'll speak about it later on, I'll have all the classes that the FHIR standards define. Okay, what method would I need? What interaction would I need to override in order to create a resource? Okay, to delete a resource, to update a resource, and so forth. In the interaction strategy class, I'll have methods that defines that interaction strategy. And this is the class that I'm selecting when I'm creating a new endpoint for my FHIR server. Okay? And the third one is the repoManager, okay, that has its own methods inside. And the things you need to define, basically, is just the connection between those three classes. Okay? So inherit from all three of them, and then need to override a couple of methods and parameters. So what are FHIR interactions? FHIR interactions are basically actions that needs to be done on FHIR resources based on the URL you're sending, okay, the full URL. So we have on the FHIR standard 3 groups of interactions, whether those are interaction on a specific instance, meaning a specific resource that I have its ID, whether it's a type, meaning I'm accessing a resource without having its ID. For creating a resource, for example, a patient resource, the URL should be my endpoint and then / and patient. I don't have an ID for that patient because I'm creating one, okay? So this is a type interaction. Or I could have a system interaction, like the metadata that I send, okay? This is a system interaction. And that list of interactions is basically defined by the FHIR standard. This is not something we've made up, okay? It's based in the FHIR standard, and this is what we're implementing in our own FHIR server. So basically, whenever I access, okay, the endpoint, depending on the HTTP methods I'm activating and the full URL that I'm sending, the interaction is activated and there's a method behind it that does the actual logic. Okay, for example, if I'll send a get, okay, method, okay, in the endpoint and then put the name of the resource, I'm actually activating a search method. Okay, I'm searching on a specific resource and I might get some query parameters at the end. If I'll do the same thing but get a specific instance, okay, I'm activating the read method, basically, okay, because I'm reading a specific instance of that resource, okay, and if I'll do the same with the put method, okay, HTTP method, I'm going to activate the update method. So all of those methods are already built in, okay. All I need to do is put my own custom code to decide what I want to do whenever someone activates that kind of interaction from the URL. So let's customize our server, okay? The first thing we need to do, like I said before, is enhance from those 3 classes. Strategy, okay, interaction strategy, interaction, and repoManager. Just inherit from all 3 of them. And then decide which method you want to customize according to the logic within your organization and which kind of resources you would like to support, okay? And basically, you can build a whole FHIR Facade that supports all types of methods, all the types of methods and all the type of resources, but it's quite rare because basically you're creating your own FHIR server for everything, okay? So you probably would start with 1 resource, okay, or 2 and extend it later on, and then you'll decide how far you want to go with this approach. So I've enhanced those 3 classes, okay? 1, 2, 3, interaction strategy, and repoManager. And then I'll need to override a couple of parameters in those classes. Basically, the interaction class is the one when I'm going to put the logic of what I'm actually going to customize, okay? Override those methods to create a resource or update a resource and so forth, okay? But the other one, basically all I need to do is a couple of parameters in each one of them, and that's it. Okay? So which parameters do I need to override? First of all, in the interaction strategy in the repoManager, it's not moving, sorry, okay. I'll need to override the strategy key parameter and put a value that is unique, okay, for this specific endpoint. Okay, it needs to be unique within the system. You can put whatever value you like as long as it's unique, and it needs to be the same in both of those classes. So it's quite easy, just overwrite, decide on the name, put that name in both places, and that's it. The second thing you'll need to do, in the interaction strategy class, you'll need to override the interaction class parameter and just point it to my interaction class. Put the name of the interaction class you've inherited. And do the same for the strategy class in the repoManager and point it to the interaction strategy class. Because those 3 classes are connected, there's a chain, okay? Each one is just pointing to the next one, so this is how you create it, okay? The next slide just summarizes everything, so if you're going to go according to the presentation later on, you'll have in these slides everything you'll need to do, okay? Basically what you'll see that is in my interaction class, nothing is being done. I just inherit from that class, but it's still empty, okay? This is where the magic is going to happen later on. Okay? Everything else is just and continue on. Ready to install? I've got the classes already inherited with everything that I needed to do. And all I need to do is go and create a new FHIR endpoint. And when it asks me what's the name of my InteractionStrategy class, I'll need to select my own class, the one I just inherit. Okay? That's the only thing I'll need to do. Okay? How do we create a FHIR endpoint? A FHIR endpoint. Basically, we need to create a foundation namespace. Everybody who comes from Health Connect, this is a new concept. We're usually speaking about namespaces, but not about a foundation namespace. So in order to create a FHIR endpoint, I'll need to create a foundation namespace. In order to do that, I'm going to go in my portal. On the left side, I'm going to select health. I don't know if anybody who's from the Health Connect community ever pressed on that, but it's there. Okay? And then I'll select from the top, there's an installer wizard, and I'm going to press on the button about configure foundation. I'll create a new foundation namespace, and then I'll have to activate it. Okay? So you'll see it as a new line in the list of the foundations you have, and just click on activate. Once you have it, you're ready to go into it and create your own FHIR endpoint. Okay. In the FHIR endpoint, I'm going under health, FHIR configuration, server configuration, and I'll add a new endpoint. In that place, this is where I need to select the new strategy class I've just inherited from. Okay? This is why we needed to do that before I created the endpoint, otherwise I wouldn't have anything else to select. Okay, I'll just have my system class to select, which is not what we want, and you cannot change it afterwards. So if you forgot to do that, the only option you'll have is create a new endpoint. You cannot use that endpoint other than that. Okay, so now we have the infrastructure. I already have an endpoint, but if someone is gonna access that endpoint, basically all the information is gonna be kept in our own resource repository. Okay, so I'm keeping the information as FHIR resources within my resource repository, but I'm not getting information from other systems within the organization, which is what we actually want. So that's the base of what building a facade is. So there's a list of interactions that FHIR defines. I'm going to show you a sample on how to override some of those interactions. In my case, I'm going to show you an example on how to override the add, delete, read, and search methods. So you would be able to add a new resource, delete that same resource, okay? Read, meaning get information of a specific resource, and search for specific resources, okay? And you can override it and implement the logic for all the resources you might want to support, or just a specific resource. Okay, and we'll see later on how we change the capability statement for the resources you've just created. Okay, but this is the sample I'm going to show you. So basically, when I add, delete, or read a resource, the logic is almost the same. I'll need to override the method. I'll need to add the logic in order to create a request. And then I'll need to call to an external class that might have that logic on what to do with that specific resource. Because bear in mind that the add resource is, the add method is in charge of creating all the resources, okay? The patient, the observation, the medication, and so forth. All the resources that we have in the FHIR server, okay? So if I want to keep the logic quite organized and not to put everything in one place, I'm probably going to ask if this resource is the patient resource. If so, I'll point to another class and put the logic for the FHIR resource over there. Otherwise, I'll have an add method which is going to be that big, and it would be too much to handle in order to understand the code in it. Okay, so most of the logic should be, if this is a patient, then activate this. If this is an observation, then activate this, and so forth. Okay, so this is what you'll need to do in those methods. If there's an error, you'll need to throw a FHIR error, okay, which is basically gonna be displayed as the response and an operation outcome resource according to the FHIR standards, which is being done automatically for you because you're using those macros and using the same logic that we built our own resource repository just the thing. So here's a sample, okay? You see I've override the add method, the delete method, and the read method. And each time I'm asking if this resource is a patient, if so, go to a different class and activate the appropriate method over there, okay? And if not, return an error, because at the moment I'm supporting only the patient resource, okay? If I would have supported other resources, then I would have added several other ifs along the way, okay? And I might do something else. I might call the super class, the super method, okay? The original method that I'm inheriting from. But if I'll activate the super method, then basically that resource would be kept in the resource repository and not being placed or getting the information from my organization application. Okay? So I'll decide which kind of resources I want to support and what I want to do with them. In those methods, okay, those external methods that I want to put my custom code over, basically I'll need to do the same thing, okay? Whether I'm adding, whether I'm reading, or whether I'm deleting a resource. Okay, I'm going to instantiate a business service. I'm going to create a request, okay, create a response, get information from the request I just received in order to send it to the business service, activate the business service, get a response, and send it back. This is the way to use if you're using an interoperability production. But sometimes you don't need to do it, okay? If you have your own information within globals, within the same namespace, that's fine. You can access them directly without going through a production. This is up to you, okay? So I'm just highlighting it because it's going to be easier to show you that an actual message has gone through if I'm going to show you a trace in my production, okay? But you can do it without it as well, okay? So it's not mandatory to do it that way. So I'm going to show you an example. This is where I need to sit. Let's start with Postman. I've got to create a patient, okay? I've got a FHIR endpoint, and I just put patient, meaning I'm accessing, trying to add a new resource, okay? I'm sending a post HTTP method, and this is the data of that patient. And I'm putting, let's say, 67000 is the social security number. And I've received back a 201 created, okay? If I look at the header, I'm going to see I have 13, which is the internal number of that specific resource, okay? And the version is 1. At the back end, since it's a FHIR Facade, if I look at my production, I would be able to see that I have a business service that received that information, okay? And I've activated a method. This is the information, and I got back a response, and this is the internal number that was created in my system, okay? Bear in mind, you don't have to use a production for that. You can just access the data in your own globals or tables, whatever you have it, but get the information back, and we'll see how we're created something back. If we look at the code, so this is the code. Basically, this is the patient add method, okay? I'm actually creating a new business service, just accessing, instantiating the business service, getting the information from the dynamic object that I just received, okay? Because I've sent a FHIR patient resource. So I can access it as a dynamic object. This is what the method receives, okay? I can access all the information within it. And then I'm going to activate that business service, send that request, get back the response. And what's most important is I need to send back a response that has that ID. And under the meta tag, I'll need to give the information of that version and that timestamp that resource was created. This is something that the FHIR standard demands of me. In our case, since I'm creating the information in a table, or I'm getting the information from my own organization, and I don't keep versions, okay? The FHIR standard do keep versions. For each one of the resources you send, whenever you update something, there's a version count, okay, that just gets larger and larger. In our case, I'm just keeping it as 1 all the time. So every time someone updates something, I'm just overriding the information, okay, and keeping the same version. If your organization supports several versions of the data, you can implement that as well. Okay? In our case, this is the sample. I'm just creating the first version, and I'm going with it. Okay? Another thing I want to show you is what would happen if I try to send the same information again. Okay? So I have basic data. I'm keeping the same social security number, okay? And I'm sending it again. If it was a real FHIR server, it would allow me to do that. Okay? I can create several patients with the same social security number. But if I'll try it again, I'll get an error, okay? And I'll get an answer that says patient with SSN already exists. So this is a logic that I've implemented within my organization. Okay, so this is something that every one of the developers who implement the FHIR Facade can decide what the logic is going to be. Okay. So remember I had that 13, that's the number of the resource I've just created. Okay, so I can delete the same resource, 13. Okay, I'm sending a delete method, okay? And I got 204, which is the correct answer about getting it, which is exactly what I needed. And if I look here, I say that I've received a delete request for number 13, and I got back a response, okay? So basically, I'm sending the information and getting it back without keeping any FHIR resources along the way, okay? But everybody who's going to send that request and get back a response doesn't know that I have FHIR Facade at the back. From his point of view, this is a legitimate FHIR server with everything that incorporates within it. Okay, so this is why it's called a facade. There's nothing fiery server that's being kept as resources. Okay. So let's continue. The third, I'll just go through the. So if we look at the delete, basically I'm doing the same, creating a new version ID, creating a business service, okay, getting the information to the request, activating the business service, getting back the response, and after I'm getting back the response, I'm overriding the version ID just to tell which version I have deleted, okay, and I'm getting the response back. So this is how I implement actually deleting a resource even though it's not has been kept anywhere else. Okay, apart from getting to my own system. The third thing is how to read a resource. And this is where it gets a bit complicated because up until now, I've received the information as FHIR, but then I transport it to a format which is internal to my organization. I didn't need to create anything that is FHIR standard related. Okay? There was no FHIR resources that I needed to return back. In our case, when you issue a read statement, read interaction, what you'll need to do is basically take that information, convert it to a FHIR resource, and send it back. Okay? So if we look and try to activate it, let's do a patient, just a second. Let's create another one because the one I've just created, I've deleted. Okay, so let's create another one. And this time, I'm getting the number 14. Okay, so let's try and read patient number 14. And I actually get a resource, a FHIR resource of that patient with all the information in it in a FHIR standard. Okay. Let's see how it's being done. Usually the tricky part, because you need to understand the FHIR standard in order to create that FHIR resource, right? But this is not how we can do it. Basically, what I'm creating here is, again, creating a new object, okay, creating a business service, getting the information of which kind of patient I want to take back, I'm gonna read, okay, getting back the information, and then what I want to do is take the information I just got back from my production and convert it to a FHIR resource, okay, without actually knowing the exact FHIR resource format, okay, without understanding it. What I'll need to do is basically transform my format into an SDA. Okay? We have simple transformation that I've created for that, because, why is it not moving? Okay, because the SDA format is much simpler than the FHIR format. Okay, so on the left side, you see the format that I have for a patient in my organization. On the right-hand side, you see what an SDA patient looks like. It's much easier to understand that than the FHIR standard. And after that, what I'll need to do is basically activate an already built-in transformation, okay, that's called, if I'll do the long name, HS-FHIR DTL util API transform SDA to FHIR, SDA3 to FHIR. And I'm just getting that SDA object to it, and it's basically going to return back that FHIR resource automatically. I don't need to understand that FHIR standard, okay? Which we have those built-in transformation back and forth. So it's going to be the other way around, okay? So if I have a FHIR, I can convert it to SDA, and then I might be able to take the information from it as well. Okay, and we have the same transformation for HL7, for example, already built in. So if you have HL7 and you need to convert it to FHIR, you just activate it. You don't need to write anything. Everything is already being done for you. Okay, so it's going to be quite easy to do it. Let's do a search, the last method that I'm going to show you. A search is a little bit more complicated because of the fact that a search has search parameters. Okay, there's a list of parameters that the FHIR standard supports. You don't need to support all those parameters. You can say, I'm allowing to search only according to gender, last name, and maybe a social security number, or whatever other search parameters you decide to support. Okay, so first of all, the first thing you'll need to do when you get a request for a search, you'll need to decide if the parameters that were sent are valid from your point of view, if you support it, okay? Then you'll, again, create a business service, send the information, get back the response, and transform that response to an actual FHIR bundle, okay? Because a search might give you more than one resource. A read gives you one resource back. A search might give you more than one or might not give you any, but you'll get a bundle back. And don't worry, it's even easier than you'll think. So in our case, I'm going to support in my code 3 types of search parameters. Okay, social security number, which is going to be sent under identifier, a gender, and a family. And I would allow for those search parameters to be combined as well. Okay, so you can select by using 2 of them, 3 of them together. Okay, it's up to me to decide what I want to do. Why is it not working? Okay. So let's look at the code. The code basically is saying this. You're getting as the parameter, you're getting the list of search parameters that I'm asking you to search for, okay? So I'm creating that search set as the first line of code. It's going to be the place when I'm going to add all the resources I have found. I'm creating a new request and response, and I'm going to loop through all the query parameters that I've received, okay, one by the other, and just make sure that I'm supporting all of them. And if I do, I'm going to take the information from that query parameter in order to build a request that I can send back to my production. Okay, so all the code over here is basically look at what's being inserted there, take the information, and continue to the next search parameter. In this case, I'm going to allow you to search by an identifier, but only if you're searching by an identifier of a US social security number, not by any other social security number, okay, not by any other identifier. And then I'm asking about the gender, and then I'm asking about the last name. And if not, if you're asking by a different search parameters which I do not support, I'll give you an error. Okay, so this is the first thing I need to do, just to validate all the information that's being sent to me is the correct one, the one that I'm going to support. And then, like before, I'm going to create a business service, I'm going to send the information to my production, and I'm going to get the answer back. What I'm going to do with the answer is, the beginning is quite similar like in the read method. Okay, what did I do in the read method? I've activated a transformation that took the information, converted it to converted it to an SDA patient, and then used built-in transformation to convert it to a FHIR. And the last thing I'll need to do is just add it to my search set, and that's it. So I'm reusing the same transformation I already did before. Okay, remember that transformation? Okay, it's the same one. I'm using it again when I get the results of the search action. Okay, and then I'm again activating the transformation from SDA to FHIR. And the last thing I'll need to do is activate the add row method that actually take that FHIR resource and add it to my result set, okay, to the search set that I need to return. Okay. If I'll, just a second. So if we look at Postman, I'm going to search my last name, for example, okay? And I got a bundle that has 9 resources in it, okay? And I've got a list of all those resources according to the FHIR standard. If I look and see what happened in my production, basically I've got a request that says search by that last name, and I got a response that has all the patients in my own format from my own organization, and I've just converted them to FHIR. Okay? So everybody who's just issued the search against my FHIR endpoint would get a FHIR response. He doesn't need to understand that behind the scene, I took the information from my own organization without even putting it as a FHIR resource inside a repository. Continue with the methods. We've just seen how I've implemented adding a resource, deleting a resource, reading a resource, and searching for resources, okay? The example was about a patient resource, but of course you could do it with any other resource you have within your organization. What you'll need to do afterwards, just a second, is update the capability statement. Okay? The capability statement is basically a statement that says, this is what my FHIR endpoint supports. This is what my FHIR server supports. Okay? I support this kind of resources, and I support those actions and these search parameters on those resources. Okay? And since I've updated the thing I support, I'll need to update the capability statement to match it. How would I do it? Well, basically, I'll go in my interaction class. What? This one. Okay, okay. Okay. So basically, we're going to override the capability method. Just a second. Okay. The recommended way is actually activating the super method in that class. So I'll have the capability statement as a dynamic object, and then I'll just loop through all the resources over there. Okay. Instead of creating the whole capability statement from scratch, just run the upper, okay, the super, get everything in it, and just override the specific places that I want to override. In this case, I've overrode the interactions that I'm supporting and the search parameters that I'm supporting according to the code I've just created. I just customized. Bear in mind that after creating that method, I'll need to actually activate it, okay? In order to update the capability statement, go to your terminal and run the console setup, okay? Select option number 7, which is update the capability statement. It would run this method, and then if you'll go to the metadata, you'll see that you got the updated information for your server, okay? So if someone would try to send something which is not this, okay, which is not the interaction you support, he would automatically get an error, okay? So even though I put my own code, okay, to prevent them from doing this, the capability statement would do it as well. Okay, so you can do it both ways, just to be on the safe side that nobody's gonna, slip through the cracks and enter a resource into a resource repository. You can put the code both, either in the capability statement or in your own customized code. And the last thing is how to validate. Well, in Tani's presentation before that, I suggest you to go and look at it, he showed how to validate the actual data inside a resource. Okay? I'm not speaking about validating data, I'm speaking about validating schema. Our own FHIR service that receives the information actually activates that same validation for you. But if you create your own resource, you can as well validate that, the resource on your own. In order, in order to do that, you'll need to decide which schema you're working on. In our case, number R4, this is the FHIR schema. You'll create a new validator object, and you'll just send to that validator object, just activate the method of validate resource and send the resource you've just created. Bear in mind that the validator resource does not return any status. It just throws an exception. Okay, so you'll need to put it in a try and catch block. And then you'll know if you had an error or not. Sorry. Again, it's the end of the day and the end of the presentation. I know, I need to speak to that, but you don't need to hear me coughing. So basically, this is it. You can validate your own schema and see how it works. There was a list of FHIR presentation throughout the summit. I encourage you to go and look for it. Since I'm the last one, I cannot tell you to go and register to each one of them, but you can download the presentation and look for it on your own. And we're building our own health tutorial, IRIS for Health tutorial. And if you think that this presentation is valuable and it's something that you would recommend putting in that tutorial, please scan the code and put in your vote if you think it would be helpful. And now is the final 7 seconds for questions, if there are any. Yeah.
So this is only FHIR resources that can represent instances of data, so that organizing resources like a list resource or questionnaire resource, this.
Yeah, well, basically, it needs to give the information back the same way as a FHIR server would. And this is how a FHIR server would. Okay, if I'm doing a search, I'll get a bundle of resources. So this is the only way I can send it back. I can send something else, but it wouldn't be a FHIR Facade. It would be something else.
But those resources can't be represented this way.
They're not being kept anywhere else. Okay, it's not being kept in a resource repository, if that's a question. Was that the question?
Not being kept.
Well, basically, what I've done is I've got FHIR requests and I return FHIR responses, but along the way, I didn't have any FHIR within my organization other than transforming the information back and forth. So I could have created anything else, okay, but I needed to give back a FHIR resource.
Right.
Because this is the standard. Okay, I could have done anything else, it just wouldn't have been FHIR.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So could this be extended then to create your own interactions, as long as both parties agree to what your interaction was and what they expect to get back?
Yeah, it won't be a FHIR standard.
Right.
Okay, but you can change a capability standard and capability statement and add your own.
Right.
Okay, or you can add your own operation. We already have everything in it.
Excellent.
The
Thank you.
thing is, if you create your own interaction, basically there won't be anything that would point to that interaction, because the interaction is a part of the FHIR standard. So according to the URL, we would know, our own FHIR service would know which method to activate. If you create your own, there won't be any URL that would point to your new method.
Oh, so it would not create the URL for someone to point to?
Not an interaction. You can create an operation.
Okay.
Okay, or because there are any other, non-existing HTTP methods that are not part of the FHIR standard, because most of them are already mapped. The put, the get, the post, okay, the patch, Each one of them has a list of what they should do, okay? It's not, it's not a FHIR standard. And if you're working in this capacity, you're activating our FHIR service that works according to the FHIR standard, okay? So you can override, let's say if you're issuing a patch, for example, or a put, a HTTP method, okay? You can change it if the other side knows what it's going to be, then you might decide what's the new thing it needs to do instead of the FHIR standard, but not creating a new one because nobody's going to activate it.
Okay.
Unless you want to override our own service, which is, not recommended, but can be done.
Thank you.
By the way, I think custom operations should be the right approach.
Yeah, custom operation, but it's not an interaction.
All right, so all the code that we saw there on the service, right, is done on the service, on that class. So you actually, the service get the request, you do the transformation, and then you return back to the caller, right? Everything is done in just one class?
Yep. But basically, your code is going to be divided between two classes. The first one is the interaction class that basically is going to ask what resource is it. You could put everything, all the code in it, but it's just going to be too big.
Yeah, but
okay?
it's getting called from one
yeah,
single
and then
class.
it would point to a different external class when you'll put your own logic, just to keep it less complex. Okay,
But
so
in terms of the visualization on the management portal, we're just looking at the service. That's it? Just
yeah,
one
just
service.
create the endpoint and select the interaction strategy class.
And
And
now,
it would automatically go to those methods in your own class.
now this is, applies if you have the data right in that system.
I didn't hear, sorry?
This will apply if the data that you're querying or you're saving is in the same system that the endpoint exists.
No, because you're using a production, for example. So the information can be in a different system, in a different server somewhere else. Okay, you can access any point of data you have that you can access. It's not limited.
So is there an operation connected to that service in this example?
I didn't understand.
A business operation. Is there a business operation connected to that service?
In the sample I just showed you, I'm just keeping the information in a global, so you can just take the information and run the same demo. But you can take your own business operation that would take it, I don't know, access using a REST service to a different place or an SQL database or any other point of data you have and get the information from there. Okay? Everything I've just showed in the production is just something I handcrafted for the demo. You can build whatever you like. If you don't want to use a production and you want to access globals, for example, then you wouldn't need it, but they need to be accessed within your server. Okay? Otherwise, you wouldn't have any access point to get to that data.
Now, can you think about a use case, someone running IRIS for Health just for integrations? So basically, what I'm trying to find out if what are the use cases for potentially use cases that someone could have that is running IRIS for Health just for integrations, meaning that handling HL7 messages which only they get stored for 30 days, 60 days, whatever purchase strategy everyone has. So meaning that we don't have an actual, we don't keep in the data for a long period of time.
So you'll need Health Connect. You wouldn't need IRIS for Health for that if you just want it for integration. Okay? That's
Right.
the first thing. If you'll still want a FHIR Facade based on Health Connect, you'll just need a different license to add a FHIR add-on, and you would have it as well, or use a FHIR adapter that would just open you a specific interface supporting FHIR, not a FHIR Facade, but an endpoint that you can access and give information through it. To use IRIS for Health just for interoperability without keeping the data in it, that's not the point of IRIS. That's the point of Health Connect.
Right. So I guess what we're trying to say is there's probably just a little bit of use, if there is any, in Iris for Health to use a FHIR endpoint?
So you can take Health Connect, add a FHIR add-on. You wouldn't need to upgrade to Iris for Health to get FHIR capabilities. Okay? The base thing is if you have a FHIR add-on, okay, you can create your own resource repository, meaning keeping the information in your own server. Okay? A FHIR Facade is, a subset of a FHIR server. It's not the actual point. Okay? So you can do it, but if you're asking if you want to have a FHIR capabilities, you don't need to upgrade to Iris for Health just for that. Okay? Iris for Health, in comparison with Health Connect, is the fact that Health Connect is an interoperability purpose, okay? And it shouldn't keep information in it apart from the part of tracing information for a month, 2 months, depends however you are, but it's not the last point of data. It's not where the data should reside for the long run. It's not a database, okay? It's only available for tracing information, not to keep the data. So, if you're going to use a FHIR server in Health Connect, you would need to change the license. So you would be able to keep the data in it. That's
okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just for the use case, in fact, you're using the FHIR Facade because you have a Health Connect, or you're using a FHIR Facade because the legacy system, you don't want to duplicate the data in a storage?
I'm using FHIR Facade, first of all, for the use case.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, to show you that you can still support FHIR, okay, without going through the decision, the organizational decision of, I want to keep another database to keep FHIR resources in my organization and maintain synchronicity with that information and other systems, because it's a pretty big decision you'll need to do. Okay, the organization needs to get to a point where it says, this is another place to keep data, and that data should be updated, okay, and synchronized and maintained, okay? And the side effect of the fact is you want to show everybody that you do support FHIR. Everybody is speaking about FHIR. You want to say, I support FHIR as well, even though I haven't gone to the place to decide that I want to keep a repository for it. But I still want to maintain the interaction with FHIR. Maybe in the long run, a year from now, the organization will decide this is the way it wants to go. Okay? But at the current time, I want to offer, okay, a FHIR endpoint. Nobody has to know what's behind the scenes. Okay? This is for your own organization to know and not to tell, or do tell. Okay? Everybody else would have a FHIR endpoint that they can interact with. Any other questions? Well, enjoy the social
Thank you, Keren.
events.